So, to go ahead and get started, there are three things I wanted to say. You guys know I like to give a little bit of context to what we're about to do before we just hop into it. And the first one is that in these meditations, our kind of staple approach is knowing ourselves as what you could call awareness, just that primordial aspect of ourselves that if it wasn't for that, then nothing else could be known. So you could call that awareness because if there wasn't something being aware, then what would there be that what else could there be? So that's a kind of staple for what we do. Sometimes I like to call that nothingness because in contrast to something, this thing we're calling awareness is nothing. But if you put this into the context of spiritual or religious wording, I think most commonly we would say soul. So the challenge, though, with soul is it oftentimes stays a concept. And what we want to do is find that concept in our experience now. What is the experience of the concept of soul? And I think that's when it's helpful to shift from the word soul to the word awareness in order to find it in our experience now. Because if we are that, it must be happening now. It must be here. So that's a staple. That's the first thing I wanted to say. Then the second thing I wanted to say is that the last couple of these meditations, we've been focusing on seeing the illusion of time and space by witnessing the way that our thoughts, images, and memory come together with direct experience, the present moment, to create the appearance of space or the appearance of time. And we didn't necessarily take those apart or say that either space or time was bad or wrong, but we're just wanting to witness the way those things come together, space and time come together with the present moment, what we can perceive with our senses, in order to create the appearance of space and time. But this time, what we're going to go into is, and this is the third thing that I wanted to say, is we're going to look more directly at experience. We're going to look more directly at sensation, for instance, and see what is really there. We have a lot of ideas about our direct experience. We have a lot of ideas about sensation. We certainly have a lot of ideas about emotion. We also have a lot of ideas of what this thing is we call our body, and a lot of ideas about the world we see. But outside of our ideas of them, what is actually there? Is there anything there? So that's what we'll be exploring. Again, it's always just witnessing the way that the parts of ourself come together to create the experience. And for those of you who've been coming to this meditation for a while, you know that we like to look at it in that way. We like to witness What is actually happening that creates our experience? And the last thing I'll say is that, again, for those of you who are used to coming here, you know that it's not so much the world out there that we experience, but more so the way our minds have constructed what we think is out there. So again, it's not so much the world out there that we experience, but what we experience is the way we have constructed our mind to think about it. I love that statement so much. It just really rings in my heart as true and helpful. It's not so much the world out there that we're experiencing, but more so the way we have constructed our own mind to think about it. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into our meditation. I'm going to mute my phone so I'm not disturbed. And whenever you guys are ready, we'll go ahead and begin. So feel free to get comfortable and close your eyes. Now, anytime we're attempting to become more centered, if our eyes are open, or to meditate when our eyes are closed, we very simply first notice, simply notice what is already here, what is already happening. Notice what our direct experience is. It can be helpful to point out what could be meant as direct experience. When our eyes closed, direct experience, when referring to sensation, wouldn't be sensation of the body, but direct experience of sensation would be sensation itself. So to be more clear, it wouldn't be direct experience to say, it wouldn't be the direct experience of sensation to say sensation of the body. Because this would be already referring to something indirect, referring to our thoughts, to know about sensation. But if we're wanting to experience something directly, we wouldn't refer to something that knows it indirectly, such as our thoughts. We would go right to it. So an example of direct experience is sensation. Similarly, if we hear a sound, to say direct experience is the sound of a bird chirping, if that's what we hear, would be to not experience the sound directly. Or, excuse me, to refer to an image of a bird chirping when we hear the sound of a bird would again be to not experience the sound directly. It would be an attempt to know the sound indirectly through the labeling, this is a bird, or the seeing the image of the bird. But if we want to know direct experience, then we would go to the sound itself. Furthermore, notice that in direct experience, it can't be known the distance in which that sound is occurring without referring to a thought or an image. Again, after we have removed the thought label about the sound of the bird and the image that may accompany the sound of the bird, we may also notice that we have to remove the idea of distance. In order to experience the sound directly. And it is possible and important to do so, to approach a thought in the same way. When a thought arises, we can experience it in two ways. We can know it indirectly by referring to a thought or an image to give that initial thought more context. Or if we don't refer to that context, we can experience it directly. What is a thought without the context? What is a thought without the context? Is there anything there at all? And the last example of direct experience, when our eyes are closed, is emotion. If we really want to know what something is, well, we wouldn't refer to something that indirectly knows it, such as a thought, in which might label it, or an image, in which might associate it with something, or a memory, in which might remind you of what it meant in the past. If we really wanted to know something, of course, we would go to it. And discover directly what is really there. What is an emotion? Directly experienced. Without referring to our ways to know something indirectly, a thought, an image, or a memory. What is an emotion directly? If we completely go into it, what is really there? Is there anything dangerous? Is there anything to get away from? Is there anything there at all? Our eyes are closed. So we can't see with them in this moment. However, we can imagine what it's like when our eyes are open as a way to account for the direct experience of our eyes being open within the context of this meditation. So for a moment, let's imagine our eyes are open. And if we're really wanting to know what direct experience is, if we're really living this life, it seems like we'd really want to know what direct experience is, what life itself is. And so again, if we wanted to know something for what it is, we probably wouldn't refer to something that indirectly knows it. We would probably go to it for ourselves. If we wanted to know the experience of, let's say, honey directly, if we've never experienced it directly before, we probably wouldn't be satisfied with what our thoughts told us that the experience of honey would be. We would probably want to experience it directly for ourselves. Similarly, with sight, within the context of our imagined image of our eyes open, since we're living this life, it seems like we'd probably want to know what is really there directly. What is the substance of whatever I'm looking at? We know what it is indirectly. We know what our thoughts make it out to be. Some defined object we're looking at. Which has excuse me, a substance that it's made out of, which could be labeled. And even deeper than that, we would probably say it is made up of atoms and molecules and electrons, matter. But is any of that whatsoever experiencing it directly? What is really there? Is there anything there at all? Without referring to a thought, an image, or a memory. About as far as we can really say is that we know there's a knowing of direct experience. There's a knowing of direct experience. There's a knowing of sight. We can't even really say that there's a knowing of the object we see. All we can say for sure is there's a knowing of sight. Or maybe a better word than sight would be a knowing of perceiving. We know perceiving is happening. But again, without referring to something indirectly, like a thought, we can't identify or label anything within this perception. We also, without referring to a thought, can't know of distance or perception being out there. Only thought would say this perception is of something out there, of a world. And by exploring our direct experience in the way we did today, we can see for ourselves what it is that's really there and the way our minds have constructed to think about what's there. Go ahead and take a moment to ask yourself, what is it that I most need to know moving forward? What would be most helpful to know? And allow your mind to either formulate that for you or just allow it to come in on its own. We're going to slowly start bringing our attention back to each other and our conversation while remembering whatever we needed to know. and remembering this piece. And when you're ready, feel free to take in a deep breath and open your eyes.